welcome to ADIPEC Energy Dialogues, our series of conversations with industry thought leaders. I'm Gaurav Sharma. Today we are joined by Craig Hayman, who is the CEO of AVEVA, and we're absolutely delighted to have him. Craig, welcome to the broadcast.
Gaurav, thanks for having me.
It's a great time to have you on board because it's a pivotal moment. The world is facing a pandemic. There is some frugality in the operating climate being sought by most of your clients and customers in the wider energy spectrum. So I think let's just start off just to get things going. You have a front row seat to the proliferation of digitization that the industry is witnessing. So from that front row seat, from that viewpoint that you have, how do you see the pathways and the journey of the industry going forward and AVEVA's own role in it?
You know, it's very interesting, and it's unprecedented times, especially in the energy industry, in particular oil and gas. And so there's two things customers are looking for. One is they're looking for certainty around the capital expense that they're spending. And the second is around they want to reduce risk while also reducing their operational expense. And so right in the middle of that is, of course, the industrial Internet of Things, the digital twin, the digital transformation. Many of these customers they've hired chief technology officers, chief digital officers. They've seen some success from these digital projects. And so they're really asking, how can they use more digital to do those two things, to provide certainty to the capital projects, and more certainty of handover, more certainty those facilities will perform, and also how can they operate their existing facilities while reducing their operational expense, of course, while keeping everyone safe.
I think if you look at you speak about the acceleration of digital transformation. One recurring theme that keeps coming up again and again, whether it's plant operations or control rooms, is the importance of artificial intelligence. It's sort of the key theme that's emerging. And from where you sit and where AVEVA sit, what is your take on the journey forward using premised on AI, of course?
Yeah, look, artificial intelligence is really transforming all industries, and oil and gas energy is no different. So I think it all starts with data. So if you know these facilities have been collecting data for many years, storing the data, and historians have all sorts of historical information about the performance of compressors, distillation columns, pipelines, storage facilities. And that data has really been sitting sort of unused, untapped. And right in the middle of this comes along artificial intelligence. And what artificial intelligence can do is start looking at that data and find patterns around it. So for example, if you had an employee who was used to standing next to a compressor, they might know everything about that compressor. But artificial intelligence is looking at the data from just that compressor and all the facilities around it over a long period of time, day and night, over weeks, months, years even, and it can predict what's going to happen to that piece of equipment in the future. And what that means is you can predict when it's going to fail. I had one customer describe this to me as when they want driving that compressor, they want to drive it really hard as they can, but they want to be sure that they know when it's going to break before it breaks, sort of this preventing unplanned downtime. So this is just one example of where AI is really beginning to take hold. Of course, cloud is important here because you want to bring that data, flow that data into the cloud, like you would from a stream to a river to an estuary to an ocean. You want to flow that data so that the more data you have, the more effective your artificial intelligence systems are. And the experts here describe this as the 4 Ps: predictive, performance, prognostic, and prescriptive. And so that's really quite transformational in our industry. Now, from an AVEVA's perspective, we don't think that it's just going to have one, like the Space Odyssey, the 2001, the HAL computer will show up and tell you everything. We rather think that artificial intelligence will be infused into everything. So that means as you dispatch a worker to work on maintenance, they will be assisted by artificial intelligence, giving them some insight or some repair procedures or some safety procedures that are using data, but advising them along the way. Or similarly, the plant operator will be using AI to advise them when to perform maintenance and prevent unplanned downtime. It's really quite a big moment.
I think that's a fascinating thing you've just said. And I think over the years, you can give us a contrast of the here and the now. You explained some of the options, some of the technologies, the solutions available to big oil and gas companies or the energy spectrum in general. But from where you sit, Craig, how have you seen operators' agility being enhanced by the sort of solutions you provide?
Yeah, I think you have to think about the full life cycle. Many of the facilities that are in operation today have been operating for 20, 30, sometimes 40 plus years. They've changed hands several times, owners. They have shared ownership structures, different, maybe their entirety of their production footprint might be owned with multiple companies. And you've got new facilities being built, albeit CapEx has been reduced of late. I think the estimates I saw was $250 billion in CapEx that will go through a 30%, maybe even a 40% reduction. But that's still a lot of CapEx that is largely not digitalized. So on the build out, what we see is build out new facilities, work creatively between the owner operators and the EPCs. So when you hand the facility over, you're handing over a digital twin of that facility at the same time. So what this does is it reduces your handover risk and provides more certainty of operation. When you're designing the system, do simulation at the same time that you design it. And what we've done is we've brought together the chemical process simulation into the 3D design system. So as you're laying out your facility, maybe the change in the height or the width of a pipe, we're running 250,000 simultaneous equations to show how that facility will operate at a startup, at shutdown, and at different levels of operation. And then that's on the design and build out and handover. Of course, standards are important there, standards of data, interoperability between vendors, handover standards. And then on the operational side, it's all that we talked about. It is looking at the data that sits inside these facilities and using it. This is like another reservoir that companies can tap into. It has so much richness of information, but it's unused. It's not been refined in any way. And so we think this is back to artificial intelligence and the cloud. We think that that's a big activity for customers. And look, there's no new budgets anywhere. People want to deliver more projects with more certainty with less cost. Digital helps them do that. They also want to operate these facilities for less cost, with higher safety and lower risk. Again, digital technology helps you do that. You have to go a long way to find anything in any industry that would drive such a substantial change as digital would for our customers. And finally, Gaurav, I'll talk about value chain optimization. So we just announced something I think is kind of a cool thing to do is we put a sensor. So as your oil is being extracted, we can look at the composition of it. We can figure out what assay it is pretty rapidly. We can then run a value chain optimization between storage facilities, refineries, ships at sea, spot market prices, and run that value chain optimization, that supply chain planning, not just once a year, but run it 12 times a year, burst it into the cloud, run it within minutes to optimize it. And in some cases, our customers, that's another $1 a barrel or $100 million of economic value every time you run that optimization. I think this is quite exciting.
It's very interesting. I think in our conversation so far, you've brought up the crucial subject of legacy issues. You've also mentioned the value that emerging solutions bring to the table for I shouldn't call it an old-fashioned industry, but rather an industry that is rapidly digitizing. Yet, Craig, the operating conditions are what they are, courtesy of the pandemic. There are other pressures. Macro climate is what it is. So in such a climate, how hard or easy it is for companies such as yourselves to help big oil or the energy space accelerate these pathways, the digital pathways, whether we're talking the plant or the control room, I mean, you have solutions for everything, but how hard it is under the current climate to get them around to your viewpoint.
Yeah, so let's just, of course, in the current climate, of course, everyone's focused on protecting lives and livelihoods at the same time. So the question is, how can you, how does digital help in that? Well, let's just, first point is if you're designing, you have a large project where you're designing a facility of people all over the world, well, the cloud brings them together. So now you can have your engineers, your EPC, working and collaborating remotely if needed, with all of that data shared in the cloud. It's reduced the risk from people going into an office to do their design facilities. We ourselves have made available for no additional fee to allow customers to operate their design projects entirely in the cloud. Then you come down to the operational facility. Again, I'll repeat, there's no new budget. So what we will do is we'll go into a customer and we'll say, hey, look, let's just take a class of your assets. Let's say compressors or turbines or some such. Let's say, and let's look, attach our system for a couple of weeks, and we'll tell you something about those systems that you didn't know. We'll tell you a few things you did know, but we'll tell you a few things you don't know. And the savings that you generate from that will help you fund digital projects. So, because you think of this, all of the unplanned downtimes, the outages, the production fines, these are all in company's operational expense. So what we're doing is we're reducing that operational expense and perhaps competing for some of that spend to be on digital. These are I think I've heard you use this term before, pathways. These are the pathways. If you ever walk to the beach, you see the pathways through the dunes where other people have walked, because it's easier to walk through these pathways. And so these are these digital pathways, the paths through the dunes that let you understand how to drive digital in a financially and safe manner.
I think one of the things, and if you look at solutions, you look at where the world is going, we keep hearing the expression big data. We see the proliferation of cloud computing. Is there such a thing as an information overload, or things becoming a bit too cloudy, if I may say so? And you're tied into that some of these big data solutions and advanced analytics and cloud computing, I beg your pardon, enable sort of alarms and detection systems. So what kind of fail-safes do we have for these alarm systems to not sort of have an overload of alerts? And then secondly, of course, as my entry point was, is it too big, or is it is big data being too big, or is it getting too cloudy?
Yeah, it's a very good point. Look, I think visualization becomes important. The dashboards of old, the operational facilities of old was somewhat the fire hose of data being rendered, which we've all learned quickly overloads operators. It tires them, and it means that they're unable to see the patterns and the trends. So first off, we think it begins with spending the time on just making visually stunning unified operation centers that are present the data in compelling ways that's useful to the business. I think you've seen us do that at ADNOC. You've seen us do that in other places around the world. And by the way, we do this in other industries. We do this in mining. We do this in cities. We do this in airports. It's just this beautiful visualization of the data. It's like on your phone. You don't see all the data your phone has. You only see the data that you need based on the app that you're using. We're doing the same thing in the oil and gas industry. The second thing is then this artificial intelligence, which is then providing some insight, predicting, being sort of being able to understand what will happen and assist you in some way. And that now brings that back to that visual. It's not your red, yellow, green, flashing warning light of old that we've all seen in our science fiction films. Rather, this is very subtle hues, visual alerts that is sort of not soothing, but really draws your eye in a non-tiring way to the patterns that are anomalies. And something wonderful happens here. You now have people within an organization or across their their footprint of operators, they look at that data together. And when you look at data together, you have a shared understanding of it for the first time. You say, oh, I didn't know this, I didn't know that, I didn't know that that went over there. Oh, that's interesting. And so now you're having a collaborative discussion about the data. The data is binding people together around what is their real business. I think that is sort of the human element of this journey of digital transformation.
I suspect that when you're about to make a system cleverer, it's not big data on its own is not enough. It's what you do with it that matters.
Yes.
Is the standard joke that goes around the system. But then I guess that brings us, ties it, sort of cues us very nicely for my next question, which pertains to the skill set. You're powered by the brainiacs and the experts and the enthusiasts who are part of your workforce. Now, you yourself as an industry expert would agree that the tech cycle that we're witnessing is shortening. It was a decade, then it's half a decade. Now it's a matter of years where the technology completely turns on its head. So for companies such as yourselves and the sort of talent that you seek, it really is bottling down to always being on your toes.
Yeah, this idea of learning. I think you have to have a sort of a posture where you're always trying to learn in some way, because there's always something new to learn. And I think that's I like your expression on your toes, because on your toes forces you to lean forward. You're curious, you ask a question. And that's what we do with our customers. When we sit down, we ask questions. If someone told me a long time ago, if you never ask a question, you never learn. And so you can learn, okay, how are you applying data? What is your business problem? And look, I think where we are today is different than where we were 2 years ago. 2 years ago, there was a lot of energy on people becoming educated about the power of big data, about digital transformation, Industry 4.0. That led to sort of the staffing, the hiring of these digital teams within our customers. They've also, many companies have also begun, they already have a digital agenda, they've begun digital programs. But now they're looking for, okay, I've started, now how can I go faster? And that's where you want to bring the best practices, not just what you've learned inside your company, but the best practices across the entire world, which is of course why places like and events like ADIPEC are just awesome.
I think indeed so, and I think let me just bring in a very AVEVA specific question. Earlier in our conversation, you touched on the concept of remote working and how you're assisting your clients with that premise. Look, Craig, the pandemic has obviously got created some profound changes in the way companies operate and in whole industries indeed operate. So let me be very specific here that given the macroeconomic climate as it is, and the kind of solutions being sought by the industry, very specifically on AVEVA, what are the kind of solutions that are making waves with your clients and you see a demand for over the next 12 to 18 months, shall we say?
Yeah, look, clearly the pandemic reframed all of our lives, both personally and professionally. And I think we all went through both personally and professionally, things that we said, I'm not doing that, you're suddenly doing it. We're working remotely, we're talking remotely here. It changed dramatically how we think about everything. And so we saw that almost overnight. Specifically in oil and gas, there was a focus on, well, how do you work remotely and safely? Customers who had said, look, I have these reasons why I don't like cloud, and it could have been, there is a standard list of them. There are important points, data privacy, performance. That's not what we do here. Our culture doesn't fit that. It's the list of sort of a litany of questions. What happened is overnight, those objections didn't seem important anymore, because you knew if you moved your engineers, your design engineers, your EPCs, if you move them to work remotely, they would be safer, and your projects, your capital projects, would stay on track, and they would have more certainty. And so that reframed how people think about it. And the way I think about this also is, how long does it take to form a habit? You start something, you say, I'm going to eat healthier, or I'm going to go to the gym more or something. I think it's about 3 months. If you're doing something over and over after 3 months, it just becomes, that's how you think you always did it. And so here we are, 5 months, 6 months in, and I think the shift towards cloud, how we operate here remotely, has become the norm. It will be the exception if to revert back. So cloud really has been a big uptake. And the other area is this area, we call it asset performance management, or APM, which is about this machine learning, artificial intelligence, using that data and advising customers to prevent unplanned downtime. Those two things are really quite a substantial trajectory change.
Let me ask a sub-question tied into that. You mentioned some of the products, you mentioned some of the solutions that you provide, and that there is a take-up for the industry. A lot of people are tying in the energy industry's efforts towards digitalization directly to their efforts lowering their carbon footprint. So do you subscribe to that theory? And of course, what sort of changes have you noticed over the last, say, 5 years? It's become an even more pressing topic in light of COVID, but it's always been there in the background.
Yeah, look, sustainability is an important topic, and I think we're all very much focused on a sustainable future. We all want, though, to ensure that we can serve the world's energy demands while driving towards a sustainable future. And so in many countries where their energy consumption is flattened or declining, there are other countries where energy consumption is increasing. The types of energy we're consuming has changed, is changing. So for example, aviation, right? We're not all flying as much. So that there's also the distribution of energy. Of course, electrification is one of the most efficient ways to distribute energy. And so driving more electrification in the world, this is where our partnership with Schneider Electric is really quite important. So this is sort of one aspect, is how can you allow for efficient consumption, efficient energy transitions? How can you do that? The second part is, how can you look at the footprint you already have and operate that more efficiently? So we were working with one customer as they introduced a new product that was had a lower carbon footprint. It was still carbon emitting, but it had a lower carbon footprint. It is substantially so. So that's really quite important to drive energy sort of CO2 reduction. And then finally, I'll back to the point I was on earlier, this supply chain point. It's quite stunning, actually, in the oil and gas industries, that we're mostly running on these 90-day demand supply cycles. This is where we were back in March, I think it was, February, March, when the price went to zero to negative because there was nowhere to store what had been produced 90 days prior. This is a supply chain problem. I mean, just to say it as forthright of that, it's a supply chain problem, and you can solve that by running supply chain capability. You can reduce production, you can ensure that you can optimize the full end-to-end version of your supply chain, not a siloed view of it. And again, I think this industry has really some good examples of customers who are taking leadership there. Look, it is a difficult topic, but it is one that we have embraced. We think that, especially in oil and gas, especially in other industries, that software has a part in reducing the planet's temperature.
Absolutely. It's been an absolutely fascinating conversation, Craig, but I can't let you go without sort of asking about AVEVA's own journey over the last sort of 20 odd years. And of course, if you've come a long way from your intellectual heart and your nerve center in Cambridge over the years, especially over the last half decade. You've grown organically. You've also grown via mergers and acquisitions. You've also sort of had this big news we had in 2018 about the merger, as you briefly mentioned in your earlier answer, about your merger with Schneider Electric's industrial software division. So, which of course led to Schneider being a major shareholder in AVEVA. So these partnerships, these synergies, these acquisitions, how have they shaped your journey? And could you give us a brief overview of what we can expect from you?
Yeah, look, I think our business, the software, is no different from our customers' business. It's a lot driven on partnerships. And so AVEVA is a software company, as you said, born out of Cambridge University 50 years ago. The early 3D design tools for designing process manufacturing facilities. About 2.5 years ago, we combined the software assets from Schneider Electric software. This gave us sort of the operational, not just the build out, but also the operational view of the systems. And then most recently, we announced our intent to acquire the business of OSIsoft and their wonderful product line, OSIsoft Pi, which is this data historian. The business that we have today is about 3 times the size it was just 2.5 short years ago. We're doing well, and we're taking our lessons from oil and gas and from other industries around the world out to our customers. It comes down to this point of what do we believe? And we believe that this digital journey it will be driven by people using technology. It's the technology enables people to be successful inside a company. It's not technology over people, it's technology to help people. And in order to do that, you need partnership. You need to build trust, and you need to do partnership, and you need to deliver innovation. And on that final point, we invest really heavily in innovation. It's about 15% of our overall revenue that we invest in research and development. That's the same as a tech company. It's over $130 million of developers. We have these teams, and they have about 10 to 12 people on each team. They're called a Scrum team. They're pure developers working on a development project. And we have 150 of those teams. And every 90 days, we take what we learn around the world and we go again. And we innovate around something that we've learned from maybe one of your wonderful conferences, one of our customers, and we turn that into the products, and then we work around the world. And it's working well for us.
Great, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate all your inputs and this fascinating conversation that we've had. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Craig Hayman, who's the CEO of AVEVA. For more details on this broadcast, go to adipec.com. Thank you for watching and listening.